A new report from the organization Human Rights First found thousands of migrants and asylum seekers expelled to Mexico by the U.S. were subjected to kidnappings and other violent attacks. The group says it tracked 7,647 attacks since President Biden took office. The current administration has been using a public health authority known as Title 42 to expel migrants before they can request asylum. The policy was enacted under former President Trump in March of 2020. CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez joins me now for more. Camilo, it's good to see you. So how many migrants have been expelled from the U.S. under this policy since it was implemented in March of 2020? And what can you tell us about why the Biden administration decided to keep this policy in place?
Hi, Lana. Since March 2020, when the Trump administration invoked this public health law to justify these expulsions, U.S. border officials along the border with Mexico have used this policy to carry out more than 1 million expulsions. Expulsions, of course, don't equal people because some people who are expelled to Mexico actually try to cross again and they're expelled multiple times. But it is still a huge number. We know that 700,000 of those Title 42 expulsions have been carried out under the Biden administration, and about 400,000 were carried out during the Trump administration. So the Biden administration has actually been relying on this policy even more, but the nuance is that the Biden administration has seen a higher number of migrants and asylum seekers arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border. And in terms of the justification for this policy, the Biden administration, since day one, has really relied on the same Trump-era argument to defend these expulsions. The argument is that if all migrants and asylum seekers are processed under regular immigration laws and allowed to seek U.S. protection, Border Patrol facilities will become severely overcrowded, and that will create an environment that is conducive to the spread of the coronavirus. So the Biden administration actually had plans, Lana, to scrap this policy for families with children in July, but it actually backtracked on that operation due to concerns about the rise of the Delta variant. So this is the justification, but critics obviously argue that this is a tool to regulate migration and to restrict access to asylum.
And Camilo, as you say, that this is putting everybody together in the same bucket. But as you recently reported, very few migrants processed under Title 42 are actually screened for U.S. humanitarian protection. That's supposed to put them into a different bucket to prevent people from being sent back to harmful places. So why aren't people even being screened?
That's a critical question. U.S. law allows all migrants, including those who cross the U.S. border illegally, to at least request asylum. It does not allow everyone to get asylum, but it at least allows most people, even those who don't have documents, to request this protection. But the Trump administration and the Biden administration have argued that it can suspend this asylum law through the invocation of Title 42. So people processed under Title 42 are not allowed to seek asylum. They are only referred to a U.S. asylum officer if they make a affirmative, spontaneous, and reasonably believable claim that they could be tortured if expelled. So only about 3,200 migrants have been referred for these humanitarian protection screenings since March 2020. And as I laid out earlier, more than 1 million expulsions have been carried out since that time. So this is obviously a drop in the bucket, and they believe that advocates do that this is a sign that this policy does not comply with the legal obligations that U.S. officials have to people fleeing persecution.
Well, Camilo, has there been any reaction to these reports of kidnappings and violence from the administration?
Yeah, so our colleague Steve Portner actually asked the White House spokesperson today during the White House press briefing about this report, and she said that the reports of kidnappings and assaults and even rapes against asylum seekers and migrants stuck in Mexico sounded horrifying, but that she had not read the report. We know that obviously advocates have been angry about this policy known as Title 42 for some time, and they believe that because these folks are not allowed to seek asylum and are not allowed to even have a court hearing here in the U.S., they are vulnerable, and they could potentially be subject to harm, because as we know, many of these areas in northern Mexico, like Matamoros and Reynosa and Tijuana, are some of the most dangerous cities in the Western Hemisphere. And some of these areas in northern Mexico, the State Department actually has travel advisories for them. It warns Americans not to visit them because of rampant drug cartel violence and kidnapping. So that is the main concern that advocates for asylum seekers have. The Title 42 blocks people from seeking asylum and keeps them in these dangerous Mexican border towns.
And last week, Camilo, the Biden administration said it's prepared to restart the Remain in Mexico border policy. That's expected to happen next month. What more can you tell us about that?
Sure. So during President Biden's inauguration day, his administration suspended the so-called Remain in Mexico policy, which the Trump administration implemented to require more than 70,000 asylum seekers to wait in Mexico for their court hearings. That policy was formally ended in June of this year, but Texas and Missouri filed a lawsuit trying to revive the program. And in August, a federal judge ruled in these conservative states' favor and mandated that the Biden administration revive this Trump-era policy of requiring migrants to wait in Mexico for their asylum hearing. So now the Biden administration is legally obligated to revive this Trump-era policy that it has previously called inhumane and draconian, and it expects to be able to send people back to Mexico under this program sometime in mid-November. But the important thing to note here, Lana, is that the Biden administration says this is all contingent on Mexico actually agreeing to accept these folks, because again, these are not Mexican citizens. Right. These are asylum seekers and migrants from other parts of the world who would have to stay in Mexico and wait there while their claims are heard in U.S. courts.
Camilo, as always, appreciate.
Thanks, Lana.